We're going to create a cherry blossom in this Illustrator tutorial. Now these videos tend to be a little bit longer, so open me up on a different screen, grab Illustrator, and let's start a new document. We're going to go up to File, down to New, and I'm going to do a 1920 by 1080 document. This is a little cut off because I have my UI scaled up so that you guys can see everything a little bit better. This is in pixels, by the way, and RGB color mode, and hit Create. So we've got a new document here. I'm going to save us all some time and grab the colors and bring them in. Now I want you to create a few squares outside of your artboard, so in this gray space. We're going to grab the rectangle tool, and you can just click and drag or even hold shift to create a square. Once you have that square created, use the numbers you see on the screen, let me zoom in a little bit, to make these different color swatches. So if I had this square and I double click on this fill over here, inside the color picker, there's a hex code area here at the bottom. That's where the number 54 2E44 would go, and that's going to change it to this color. So go ahead real quick, if you need to pause, create these swatches and have them over here on the side. Once you have all 4 of these created, you can click and drag to select all of them. Then we're going to open up our swatches panel, go up to Window, down to Swatches. From here, we're going to click this folder to create a new color group. We're going to base it on our selected artwork, and these don't matter as much, just make sure they're checked like I am. After that, you can name it, by the way. We could name it Cherry Blossom and hit OK. Now you have a folder of all these colors over here. Make sure you deselect any of your artwork and then double click on each one and check mark the global option. Global swatches are going to allow us to change the swatch later to change every color that uses that swatch. We want to do that before we apply any swatch to any object in our design. Okay, cool guys. Once we have that figured out, we can actually get started. So I'm going to come out here and I'm going to make sure my artboard's in the center of my screen. Press M, that's the shortcut key for the rectangle tool, and all you have to do is click on your canvas. Now my artboard is 1920 by 1080, so if you made yours the same, you can make your rectangle the same as that to make a background color the size of whatever your artboard is. Once you have that rectangle out here, switch back to the selection tool, shortcut key is V, have just the rectangle selected, come over here to your align panel. If I mention any panel that you see on the screen and you don't see it in your Illustrator, go up to Window and find the panel here. They're all named the same. So we could find the align panel up there. Make sure we're aligning to our artboard and center, horizontal, and vertical. So now we've got that background the size of our artboard. I'm going to go up to my swatches and use this swatch right here. Actually, no, I'm going to use this swatch right here as the darker color. So these 3 over here will be on our cherry blossom, and this sort of darker pink will be our background. And once we have our background here, we want to lock it in. So we're going to go up to Object, down to Lock, and then Selection. That's Command or Control 2. A really quick and easy shortcut to lock objects in your designs. Okay, let's create the first petal of our cherry blossom. We're going to go to the rectangle tool, down to Ellipse tool. The shortcut key for that is L. Click and drag and hold shift. And then once you get a circle about this size, you can let go. Now that circle doesn't look like anything, so let's go to our swatches and let's click this lightest color, almost a white. It's a little bit off-white. In nature, things are not completely white or completely black. So when you're creating organic things, making them a little bit off-white, off-black helps a lot to make it a little bit more realistic. Once we have this circle created with the color, we're gonna go to that selection tool again. I can drag this circle around. I can also hold Option or Alt, click and drag to make a duplicate of the circle. We don't want to bring it all the way out here. We want the circles to overlap a little bit in the middle. Once they do, you can let go, click and drag to see both circles. And you see how we have a little bit of a leaf here? We're going to create a petal out of this leaf shape. To do that, we're going to use the Shape Builder tool. Shift M is the shortcut key. It looks like this icon in your tool panel. It sees all the different overlapping shapes. We hold Option or Alt and our icon changes to a minus. We could click on these 2 outside areas to get rid of them. We could also click and draw through anything that we want to get rid of. And if your Shape Builder tool doesn't let you draw in squigglies or free, it just draws in straight lines, all you have to do is double click the Shape Builder tool to go to the options, and you can change the selection from straight line to freeform. I like freeform because I want to click and draw through my shapes, not just in a straight line. Now it might have created 2 leaves out here. We'll take a look, or 2 petals. It did, so we'll just delete one of them like that. And now we just have this one little petal out here. Now this petal, depending on the circles you created, I think mine could be a little bit squattier, maybe something like this. So I can just find the edge here where I get the double-ended arrows and click and drag it down to kind of skew it down. Once we have that, I'm really getting into using this paintbrush tool lately. The shortcut key for that is B. You can actually double click on the paintbrush tool, and I prefer it to be on all the the way smooth. So when I draw with my mouse, it comes out as smooth lines. It doesn't just draw exactly what I draw, because obviously drawing with a mouse is kind of difficult. So once we have it on all the way smooth, hit OK. Now I double click that just so you know, in case you missed that a second ago. We're going to zoom in a little. That's Command or Control plus and minus. And I'm going to switch from a fill to a stroke, and then double click this stroke and just make it something dark that you can see and hit OK. What we're going to draw is the little cutout at the top of our petal. So I'm just going to click and kind of draw through. Free form, doesn't have to be perfect. You can see when I let go, it'll smooth out the lines. Makes them a lot smoother like that. Now, if I press V for the selection tool, click and drag to select all, so the petal and this line, then Shift M, the shortcut key for the shape builder tool. Now I can see this separate area. So I can hold Option or Alt and subtract out this top area. Now I go back to my selection tool, click off so I don't have anything selected, select this little path and hit the delete key on your keyboard, and now we have a little cutout at the top of our leaf. That's a really easy way to just kind of like draw something, especially when you're working with something organic like this. So whatever your cutout looks like, it doesn't have to look exactly like mine. I think that every petal could even look different. They're going to be duplicated in this design, but I'll show you how to expand it later so that you can create different petals for each one, different little looks to each one. Now the next thing I'm going to do is turn the opacity down of this guy. If you don't want that, you don't have to do that, but I like the look of it. You can see in the thumbnail how it looked. So I'm going to turn the opacity down here in the appearance panel, which is in your properties panel, to 85%. When they duplicate around, they'll kind of show through each other, and I'll show you that here in a second. Let's select our object after we turn the opacity down, go up to Object, and a new feature in Illustrator 2022 was the repeat feature, and you can actually do a radial repeat. So as soon as I click on this, it's going to repeat these objects around. Now there's a few controls here. The first one is over here on the right. I can decide if I want more instances or objects, or if I want less. I'm going to choose 5. There's a little in and out point right here. So if we click and drag this around, we can basically say, hey, we want it to end before this shape. We want to repeat it all the way around. So we don't actually want to mess with this, but I wanted to show you that handle exists. The last thing here is this circle up here. You can decide rotation as well as how close the shapes are to the center or how far apart they are. So we can rotate this around, let the shapes overlap a little bit, maybe somewhere in here, and then let go. Now if we click off this object, we have all of our petals rotated around just like that. Now personally, I wouldn't expand this yet to create separate petals. I would keep it all together and use this radial tool if I need to make any adjustments. In this case, I know we're not going to make any adjustments. So with this whole thing selected, we can go up to Object, down to Expand the object and the fill, press OK. That gets rid of the radial tool adjustments and just creates all these shapes separately in a group. So these are all grouped together now, which is perfect. But I could also double click into this group and edit each shape individually. I'm in isolation mode inside of layer 1, inside of this group. So all of these shapes are individual in here. I can move them around. I could zoom in a little bit, grab my brush tool again, and maybe make a few tweaks to the edge of this. Press V for the shortcut key. You can see where I drew over that. It's kind of hard to see, so you could always change that stroke just so that you can see it. But if I wanted this petal to have a little bit of a different character to it, I could do exactly what I did before. Shift M is the shortcut key for that shape builder tool. Hold Option or Alt, kind of remove this section, press V, select only this path again, and delete it out. So now this one has a little bit different look than this one or the rest of them. I'm gonna leave it as is. You guys can edit those separately if you'd like. You could also not do this notch in the beginning. So all of these would be like our petal in the beginning that came to a point. And then you could go in at this point and make custom edits to each petal. In my opinion, you could save some time just by doing this first one and then repeating it around. You wouldn't have to go in and edit each one individually. Okay, I hope that makes some sense. Let's move on. So what we have left is the center portion. And there's a couple different features we're going to be looking at. The gradient as well as the profile options on your strokes. And if you haven't heard of that before, I'll teach you it in this tutorial. So with the gradient, basically we're going to make a center portion that kind of has a gradient to transparency as it moves out. So we're going to have a darker center and then it's going to be more transparent as it gets further from the center. So to do that, we're going to have to use that ellipse tool. The shortcut key is L. If you kind of hover over here, I'm going to press Z to really zoom in. There is a center here. These shapes kind of make a little star. Press L for the ellipse tool and see see if you can find a center point. Somewhere in here seems to be okay. I'm going to click and drag, and it's going to start to create an oval. Now, if I hold Alt on PC or Option on Mac, it's going to create that oval from the very center of where I clicked. If I also am holding Shift, it's going to create a perfect circle. That's really what I want, is a perfect circle from the center out. So then we're going to let go. Let's go to our swatches panel, and I believe this swatch is going to be this lighter pink right here. So this was our background. This lighter pink is going to be our center. Now we can back out of that and see our circle in the middle of our flower. Oops, didn't mean to click again. Press V to get back to that selection tool. You can click off of any of your objects. Cool. Now we want this to have a little bit of a gradient. So we're going to click on it, and you can click on the gradient tool, and sometimes it works to click on your object. But if you have the properties panel open, you can actually see the different gradient types over here. So I'm going to select radial gradient, and you can see this little line it made, basically going from white to black. With the gradient tool selected, you can make edits to that line. Wherever you click is the center point. So if I clicked right in the center, I could click and drag this gradient out. I like where it started, and honestly, this is fine right here. I think I would make sure that this last circle, so like where this black is, stays inside the bounds of the shape. So you see how the dotted lines show me where it's going to end? That's where I would put it, right in there. Now to change these colors, we double click on the color swatch right here in our gradient. And this is why we put these together. We have the swatches already. So I can click on this swatch here, click out, double click on the black, and select the same exact swatch. But before we click out of this, we want 0 opacity on this second one. So think of it as going from the same color to itself, except for the opacity is changing. So we click 0, press enter, or just click out. Now it's the same color, just the opacity goes from 0 or 100% opaque to 0% opaque or completely transparent. Now these two circles define where the start and stop of these colors are. So we could drag this out a little bit. So everything before this is going to be solid color, solid pink. And then after it's going to start that transparency ramp, they would call it, from 100% down to 0% transparency or opaqueness. I don't know. You know what I mean. The reason I want to pull this out a little bit is because when we draw our little, I don't even know what they're called, but the inside part of this flower, we want those lines to kind of come into the center here. We can adjust this gradient later, so let's not worry about it. Once you get it to this point, let's just click on that selection tool and kind of get out of it. Now, I don't really want to select these petals anymore, so I'm going to press Command or Control 2 to also lock the petals into the background. Now I just have this that's selectable. Okay, so let's look at stroke profiles. I'm going to press spacebar to kind of move around. I don't know if you knew that, but spacebar is this hand tool and allows you to move around your document. We're going to set something up here. Let's create a stroke or a line with the line segment tool. That's a little slash icon. You can also click right here. Once we create this line, we're just going to click and drag it out, hold shift to keep it completely horizontal, and let go. Now we need to add a stroke to this line. Depending on what you had over here, you might have a stroke. If not, I'm going to double click on this stroke. We can make it black, no problem. Hit OK. Now I want this to be a little bit thicker, so I would go 10 or 20 points. I think I'm going to type in 20 points. Actually, we're definitely going to go more than that on this document. I'm going to go 50. Perfect. So I have a start point and an end point. On this second point, I'm going to change the width of it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's a little bigger on my screen. The width tool is Shift W. It looks like this over here in your toolbar. Now with the width tool, Now with the width tool selected, a little bit of a tongue twister there, we can add a width adjustment to one of these anchor points. So I'm going to make sure I hover over this anchor point, click and drag, and you can see how I can change the width, and I'm going to bring it down about half of what it is, like that. Now, you can see in your properties panel, we have a width profile. You can also see it if you click this stroke link to your stroke options. Down here at the bottom is the profile. If we click the drop down, we have a lot of different custom and default profiles already, but I want to add this one to this list. So with this selected, we're just going to click this button to add the profile. And I don't really need to name it, so hit OK. Now this is at the bottom of our profile list, and we can actually use it, which we will here in a little bit. So the purpose of creating this stroke out here was simply to add a width profile. So you could delete it now that we don't need it anymore. Let's come back over to our design, and we're going to create those little lines that come out of the center of the flower. I'm actually going to create these with the brush tool. Remember how we double clicked it and made sure it was smooth? That's where I keep mine, so make sure yours is there so these lines look a little bit more smooth. Then press OK. Next, I'm going to make sure there's no fill, which you could do by clicking the fill and clicking none. And then on the stroke, I'm going to double click that. Actually, no, we're going to make sure it is the same color as this. So we're going to open up our swatches panel and click on this color here. Now you can see that the stroke changed to that color. We can minimize that panel. And now when we draw, it's going to be in that color. So I can click and drag out of here and kind of draw out some of these lines that are going to represent the center of our flower. Now, as we draw these out, remember we can't see the beginning of them. And if you make a mistake like this, you see how I created too sharp of an angle right here? I can just Command or Control Z to undo my line real quick and draw another one, just like that. So however you want these to kind of be coming out. If you can't see them very well depending on your gradient, what I would do is switch back over to the selection tool. That shortcut key is V. We're going to select this circle and then make sure your fill is selected. Right now the stroke is in front of the fill, so click on that fill. Once we have that selected, we'll be able to edit the gradient that's on the fill. So click Edit Gradient, and here you go. If you bring this back a little bit more, you can actually see the start points of our lines. So all I did was just kind of bring that transparency back so that I could see where these lines start. We can adjust that later so it looks the best in our flower. So we press B again. Now we've kind of got a messed up stroke over here. So what we can do is grab that fill, click None, grab that stroke, swatches panel, click on this color again. And we can continue to draw whatever we want coming out of the center of our flower, or a cherry blossom, I guess you could call it. And once you have enough lines out here, and you're good with that, what we need to do is change the profile of these lines. I'm going to press V for the selection tool, click and drag to select everything right here. Now I don't want that gradient selected, so I'm going to hold Shift and make sure I click on it over here. Now I just have these lines selected. We can group them together by right-clicking and going to Group. Then we can double-click into our group. And now the only things we can affect are the lines, so we won't accidentally affect anything else. Click and drag on all these lines. Now under your brush window, which you could go to Window, down to Brushes, we want to change this from a round brush to basic. It's going to make our lines look worse at first. Then we need to go to our stroke options. Here, we're going to up the stroke to as large as you'd like. We're going to change the profile to the one we created before. So they're going to be wider at the base and a little skinnier at the top. Now, if this is reversed for you for any reason, all you have to do is click this button to flip it. But all of mine look right, so I can click it and make sure it's wider at the bottom and smaller at the top. Now, personally, I would also click this round cap option. Now, when I'm zoomed in like this, it might be hard for me to tell exactly how wide these need to be. I'm going to set them at 8-point thickness right now and just kind of assume that's going to be about where I want them. I can double click outside of here to go back to my original layer. It's looking all right so far. I'm going to zoom in again. Now we're going to create the little bulbs that are at the end of these. We're going to use the ellipse tool for that. Shortcut key is L. I'm going to flip this back to being a fill only. Click on that fill, go to swatches, and select the darkest one. Now we can create these circles out here at the end of our lines. If you need to, you can always press Z, click and drag to zoom in. And then I'm going to press L, that's the ellipse tool, find the end of this, click and drag, and then like we did before, we held Shift and we held Option or Alt, and we created a little bulb out here, a little circle. And once again, organic things don't usually have perfect shapes. That's why we use the brush tool a lot. So to create not so perfect of a shape, we can actually go into our stroke, create a little bit of a stroke, not sure how much. I'm just going to type 5 in here and then make sure it's the right color. So we're going to change it to be the same color. And then the profile on this guy is going to actually be something like this guy here, a default one, where it's a little bit kind of wonky as it goes around, right? It kind of changes the width and the thickness. So now that's a little bit more of an organic shape. And you can make adjustments to this if you want, just by grabbing that stroke point, and I can use the up and down arrow keys to increase or decrease the amount that's on there. So if I decrease it a little bit, somewhere 2 or 3 points, now it's just going to be a little bit more organic of a circle rather than a perfect circle. So once I have that, I'm actually going to just click, hold Option or Alt, and duplicate this around to the different spots where all of these brush strokes end. And even though I don't have brush strokes here in the center, I think I need a couple right here in the center so that it looks like a couple are coming right out at us, just kind of fill in nicely. Now, as we Command or Control minus to zoom out, we can see how we've actually created this center portion. If it looks like it's a little bit smaller than you want it, you can click and drag on that. Make sure in your transform panel, these 3 dots here, you actually have scale, strokes, and effects checkmarked, and you can scale this up a little bit. So maybe somewhere in here for this cherry blossom. Now, I held Shift and Alt or Option to scale it proportionally from the center. Otherwise, it might look like this as you scale it. Even if you hold Option, then it looks really weird. But as soon as we hold Shift, it'll scale it up nice and proportionally. So once you have that about the size you want, the last thing that I would do here is make a little adjustment on this transparent gradient so that I don't exactly see the bottoms of these. So I can actually click on that gradient. I could scale it out again, hold Shift and Alt or Option to kind of make it a little bit larger, let go, make sure I have my fill selected, go to Edit Gradient, and I can bring this first point out a little bit until I don't see some of the beginning points of these lines. So they're all coming out of this pink center. I think somewhere in there works really well for this design. Press on your selection tool, double click out of there, Command or Control minus to view your new cherry blossom. Now to scale this up and down, obviously I need to bring back some of what I've locked. We can go up to Object, down to Unlock All, and now everything's unlocked. I might as well relock my background, so Command or Control 2 with that selected. Then I can select this entire cherry blossom, right click on it, and group the entire thing. Once I have that grouped, I can move it around. Even if I click on the end of this, everything moves. So we could bring it over here, we could duplicate it, Option or Alt to duplicate out here. We can make one of them smaller by grabbing the edge, Shift and Option or Alt, scale it down. Now it might look weird if you don't have that Scale, Strokes, and Effects checkmark, so make sure in your transform panel that's checkmarked. And so we can make little smaller ones out here, really quick and easy, duplicating them out, scaling them down. We can even rotate them if we wanted to and put them together just like that. And of course, the last thing is if you're not satisfied with the coloring of your design, you can go up to swatches, and you can edit all of that really quickly. So anything that used any of these swatches can be edited. So if we wanted these lines to be darker and like the center portion to be darker, we can double click on this pink, bring it over here, check preview, and we can adjust just like that. So you can see how these adjust. Now they're purple instead of pink. Really quick and easy. You can make these adjustments to your design for any of these swatches. So anything that uses those global swatches will all change at the same time, which is really helpful. That's like the power of those global swatches. I hope you enjoyed creating this cherry blossom in this tutorial. Of course, if you have any questions, let me know down below, and I'll see you in the next one.